And welcome to K-12 education budget, and a special warm welcome to Rob Reynolds, superintendent from my school district. Happy to have you up here today. Committee, we're going to go ahead and open with requests for bill introductions. Are there any requests? All right, well, I do have one, Nick, for RS 2631. Relating to establishing the school finance formula task force. And that's related to the fact that our finance formula is up for revision, or it basically expires at the end of 2027. So I would prefer for there to be a really good look at it multiple years in advance. And so that's why that bill was requested for introduction. So no other requests for introduction? All right. Committee, we're going to go ahead and move on then. We've got a bill hearing today. And so before I open the hearing on House Bill 2485, I'd like to invite our reviser, Nick, to provide an overview.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, you should have a memo in front of you that describes a summary of what this bill does, and then I hope you have the bill as well in front of you. So committee, House Bill 2485 amends the Kansas School Equity and Enhancement Act, and this relates to how school districts determine enrollment, which impacts how school districts are funded under the Act. At the top of the memo, you can see that generally enrollment is determined based on the full-time equivalent enrollment under the KISA school finance formula. Then you add the weightings to that enrollment to get a total weighted enrollment. So that's the enrollments factoring in with KISA funding right at the top. And then to eventually get to the amount of state foundation aid that the state provides to school districts, that weighted enrollment is taken and multiplied by the base aid amount. And then eventually you get to the state foundation aid amount that school districts are due under the Act. So first, let's start with what current law provides. Currently, the Kansas School Equity and Enhancement Act requires the State Department of Education and the school districts to use the student enrollment count generally based on the preceding year's enrollment count. Now, the Act currently provides for two alternatives to this preceding year enrollment count, and you can see those in the bullet points in the bottom of the first page. So the first alternative to use of preceding year is if the school district's enrollment has declined between the second preceding year and the preceding year. So if there's a decline in enrollment between those 2 years, the school district gets to use the higher of those 2 years, which is the second preceding year's enrollment count. Additionally, there's another exception for school districts that receive federal impact aid, and this is for the enrollment of military students, and if these school districts also experience a similar type of decrease in enrollment between the second preceding year and the preceding year. So with these military school districts, generally the KISA authorizes that these districts can use that second preceding year enrollment count, or they also have the option to use an average of the preceding year, the second preceding year, and the third preceding school year enrollment counts, whichever one of those is higher. So House Bill 2485 amends the definition of enrollment under the school finance formula, and this generally requires districts to use the current school year enrollment count to determine its funding obligation and the state's funding obligation for school districts. So school districts will be using under this bill the current school year enrollment count, but this bill does authorize two alternatives to the use of the current school year enrollment count. So the first alternative to the use is districts similarly that experience a decrease in enrollment between the preceding school year and the current school year. Those districts can use the preceding year enrollment count, so they get the benefit of a look back of 1 year to use the preceding year enrollment count, which is the higher of the two enrollment counts. And then also with regard to the military school districts that receive federal impact aid, if they experience a decrease in enrollment, what this bill does is it authorizes those districts to use one of three options. The districts, military districts get to use either the current year enrollment count, the preceding year enrollment count, or they can use the average of the preceding, the second preceding, and third preceding year's enrollment counts to determine their enrollment entitlement. The bill also requires that any school district that closed an attendance center building in the preceding school year, that school district has to use the current year enrollment count in the subsequent school year, in the upcoming school year, regardless of whether that school district's enrollment decreased at all. So this bill would take effect on July 1, 2024 upon its publication in the statute book if passed. And Madam Chair and committee, I'm happy to stand for questions.
All right, thank you, Nick. Committee, what questions do you have? Yes, Representative Garber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nick, I've read the bill a little bit, and it's pretty simple, I guess, but my main question is, any school that has acted under current law, can they be affected by this bill?
Well, they will be affected. If this bill were enacted, this would take effect on July 1, 2024, and that is how enrollment counts would be determined for school districts moving forward.
So any school that closed in the 22-23 school year, this bill will affect?
So this would affect school districts if an attendance center was closed in this current school year, because the bill says if there's an attendance center closed in the preceding school year, then they have to use the current year enrollment count to determine enrollment.
July 24th of 2024, the preceding school year would be 23-24.
23-24 school year. Yes, you are correct.
Closed last year, it would not affect them.
If there was a building that closed in the 22-23 school year, this bill would not impact or affect that school district as currently written.
So they would still receive, under the old law, they got to look back 2 years. Is that still the case?
Not under this bill, unless you're a military district and you can use that 3-year average type of thing. This bill would say you can only look back 1 year if your enrollment is decreasing.
So we are passing a bill that's going to affect some school districts that, in good faith, acted under a bill that was in effect or under the law that was in effect 22-23. You understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying, but I don't know that I can comment on that in my capacity, but I do understand what you're saying.
Thank you.
Representative Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nick, quick question on the impact aid. How many school districts does that affect now that we've changed the way impact aid's distributed?
I'm not quite sure how many school districts receive federal impact aid, but yes, are you thinking of the change we did where we took that away from being counted as local aid? I mean, this just says that those school districts that do receive that federal impact aid have that extra option to calculate enrollment based on that preceding, second preceding, and third preceding average. But I don't know how many school districts receive impact aid.
Yeah, there's some wording in there about military students or something like that, but it's actually determined on whether they receive impact aid or not. Is that correct?
Yeah, because the bill is written as, I mean, it generally says for any school district that has a military student and that receive federal impact aid.
And that receives.
So yes, it has to be both. So not just a school district that just has a military student as that student is defined under a KISA.
That answers my question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for our revisor? All right, committee, before we open up the hearing, just a few little items to go through. First of all, thank you to my assistant, Susan, because she provided the daily agenda with all the proponents, opponents, the written testimony as well. Sometimes you'll go to a committee and that's not provided, but she has done the extra step of making it available to you. That's okay. Oh, okay. Well, appreciate that. And she also provided the bill for you, so appreciate that as well. And also, if you are not familiar, we do have a few new members. So if you're not familiar with the S Drive, then if you haven't checked that out, it is a great resource and is updated as well. So we'll just continue to rely on that for our testimony rather than printing off all the testimony. Committee, if we could keep our comments in the, let's see, let's count up here, about the 4-minute top end range, because we have, actually, 1, 2, 6, 7. We have 7 conferees, and so about 4 minutes. We can give you a little flex. My vice chair can kind of just give you a little wave when you're getting close. And then if you would, we're not hyper strict on that today, but it would be very helpful to move along on our comments. We also take questions when we do hearings in this committee at the end of each section. So after the proponent section, then we'll ask if there are any questions, and you just let us know who you'd like to ask that question to, and then neutral, and then the opponent as well. So with that, committee, I am officially opening the hearing on House Bill 2485, requiring enrollment under the Kansas School Equity Enhancement Act to be determined using the current school year or the preceding school year, and requiring any district that closed a school building in the preceding school year to use the current year enrollment count. Also to note that Kansas Department of Education through KLRD has provided you the SB 113 veto difference. That was provided to you on the first day. We had a missed meeting, but it was also provided as well today. Note on that there are 286 school districts, 139 school districts lost funding with the governor's veto, and 43 had no change with the governor's veto, and 104 gained from the governor's veto. So with that, we'll go ahead and begin with our proponent testimony, and I will open in that section of our hearing and invite Travis, and I'm going to probably butcher your name, DeSormers, Superintendent, Nemaha Central Schools. Welcome.
Thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity. Again, my name is Tavis DeSormiers, and I am superintendent at Nemaha Central in Nemaha County. And would like to thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of House Bill 2485. The reason I come before you is being a part of Nemaha County. We in the past year, we're a part of the school closings that happened in our area and benefited from students coming to our school district. I know that other districts will also bring that to your attention, that's part of why it's important that we are able to count the current school year for our enrollment purposes, is because of that reason. But you know, I also bring a historical perspective in the fact that in our area, this has happened before, where a school district has closed and those students attend a different educational center. And this happened 10 years ago, roughly, with the closing of Burns School District, and we inherited those students to USD 115. Now, with this and moving forward, we just want to make sure that the main reason with using the current year, and then also the fact that if you are closing a school district, that you only get to count that year, is we feel like that some schools use that as an incentive to close districts, that maybe they're looking at it and saying, if we close our district, those students are going to be dispersed to other districts, and then we will be able to count those students for the current year and previous year. So basically, that's why it's important that I came before you guys and let you know that we feel it's important to taxpayers and those people that it is fair that the money definitely goes with the students. And basically, I'm going to keep my time short because I know others have to follow, so I would close with the opportunity to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, and we'll do questions at the end of proponent's testimony. Thank you, Tavis.
Thank you.
Next, we have Jim Howard, Superintendent, North Jackson Heights Schools. Welcome.
Thank you for, Madam Chair, for letting me have an opportunity to speak. My name is Jim Howard. I am the superintendent at Jackson Heights. We had an extraordinary event this year that kind of prompted my support of this bill. When Wetmore schools were closed in February, we were the closest geographic school. So of the 126 kids, 90 of them enrolled at Jackson Heights. That would be 22% increase in one single year. Roughly $600,000 of lost aid that we were not eligible for, both in local option and state aid. Just going through some of the cost, we had transportation cost, teacher cost, supplies, everything that you would imagine it would come with an increase of 22% of your enrollment. And while we were open to the conversation from February on, we were very much a school that was hurt pretty badly when this bill was vetoed. So beyond just the impact of having the money follow the students, since I've been at Jackson Heights, we've seen an increase of enrollment year over year. So not only is this a problem that hurt us badly this year, this is a systemic problem since I've been a superintendent, where if you have a growing enrollment, there's really not the same incentive as far as wanting to keep growth. When we look down to some of the other things we're looking at, we feel like the other part of that bill does incentivize schools to close. So when we look at a $600,000 loss, around $800,000 going to a school who closed and does not have their students for 2 years, that's not really the incentive I think that we're looking for, especially when we're looking at open enrollment. So as a school, we've gone from about 350 kids to now 512 over the course of 3 years, and every year we are behind on funding, hoping to get caught up. But when it's $600,000, that is a lot of money for a school our size. We're a 2A school, 22% of our enrollment, 22% of our funding. We want to make sure we do the right things, being good neighbors, but we also want that money to follow the students. I think that's the spirit of what we're looking for as far as school choice and have an open enrollment where if a parent decides to come to your school, another scenario would be the way the law is currently written. There's not much incentive for a school to take a student past the enrollment date. So let's say a student enrolls in October of this current year. I will not be eligible for funding for 2 years. I'll educate them all of this year. They won't be counted until next year. They won't be eligible for actual funding until the previous year, till the next year. So that just doesn't really speak to us wanting to, as much as we want to grow, when it's going to be a financial burden to my taxpayers and a huge hit to our cash balances. That was a great deal of money that we had to spend immediately. Once the school was closed, we wanted to be good neighbors and we wanted to make sure we gave these students a place to go. But from February on, we started spending money, buses, drivers, teachers, books. All those things had to be ready for 22% more kids and no new dollars. So that really becomes a burden for schools. And we are a small school with a large percentage. I know others will speak of hundreds of kids annually, and they're constantly behind on the funding. So I don't know exactly, I won't speak to how much is the appropriate look back or what that looks like, but to not have the money in the year the kids are enrolled doesn't seem to be the right tactic because it just incentivizes schools to not want to grow. And then on the other end, having schools that are going to close, when there's a financial windfall, we don't say that would be the reason, but that definitely is an incentive, knowing that I would be able to, in our situation, about 126 kids, 124, 126 from Wetmore, none of which went to the district that closed. They came to neighboring schools. So that would be why I'm a proponent of this bill, and I'm hoping it's something that's considered as a statewide adjustment, so we are able to fix this inequity, and then we can also have schools that are incentivized to keep growing.
All right, thank you very much, and we'll be asking questions at the end of the proponent section. Next, we have Doug Hull. He is on the Board of Education for Spring Hill Schools. Actually, he's the vice president, so welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thankfully I'll be brief. As I was introduced, my name is Doug Hull, and I am a newly elected board member for USD 230 in Spring Hill and currently serve as the vice president. USD 230 is what most would acknowledge as an enviable growing school district. And what is inconceivable to me is the fact that we would be disadvantaged, summarily penalized financially by not receiving funding for current year student enrollment. It puts unnecessary stress on the district, the administration, the staff, and most importantly, the students, by being forced to sacrifice, make compromises until the following school year when we are made whole under the current process. But this is not necessarily true, that we would be made whole. It's not true, because we are growing year over year. So this shortfall burden is a vicious cycle that repeats itself each school year. It really need not be debated. There's only one fair solution to remedy the problem. In this case, with House Bill 2485, it should be easy to recognize and do what's right. Please see current year funding pushed across the finish line and do what's right. Pass House Bill 2485. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug, and thank you for your service with your local school board. Let's see, we have one more. I want to make sure I'm not forgetting anyone before I invite Leah up. Did I miss any other proponent oral testimony besides Leah? All right, Leah Fleiter from Kansas Association of School Boards is here, and she's actually neutral. It was, you're listed twice. Okay, there we go. But we'll take neutral now, and come on up, and as you stand there for just a minute, I want to, well, hold on, Leah, I apologize. Because you were listed twice, I got out of order here. On this, we do have some written only. We have from Dr. Brent Yeager, Superintendent of Olathe, and he is proponent testimony. Dr. Link Luttrell, who is Superintendent of Spring Hill, and is he here today? Yes, there he is. Oh, were you planning on being oral? Oh, well, then you're welcome to come on up. Come on up. Yes. So I just have you down as written, but we're happy to take you as oral. So welcome, Superintendent.
Thank you, Madam Chair, very much. Good afternoon. My name is Link Luttrell, and I have the awesome job of serving the patrons of USD 230 each and every day as their superintendent of schools. In fact, Representative Thomas represents a large portion of our school district, and while he is a very vocal supporter and cheerleader for USD 230 in Spring Hill, I can unequivocally say that he not only cares about Spring Hill, but he cares about all the students throughout the state of Kansas, and we appreciate that support. But thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share our thoughts as a proponent in support of House Bill 2485. It's not an easy piece of legislation to propose, and I do appreciate the amount of work and thought that has been put into this bill. For school districts with increasing enrollment, funding based on the previous year's enrollment does create, as has already been stated, a definite financial hardship. For instance, USD 230 alone, fiscal year 24, which is our current school year, we have had an increase this year of 180 students. That's minimum. It's really on a little bit higher end, but I kind of round it down. The district will spend this year more than $1 million out of its budget to accommodate those students, which is definitely our responsibility, although our funding that we get on our overall student population is from fiscal year 23. And to provide a further glimpse of that impact, this has been perpetually constant for more than a decade, but just since 2016, our district has increased from approximately 2,400 students K-12 to this year slightly below 4,000. That's a 66% increase. So we're seeing that, as our board vice president indicated, compounded each and every year, and it's not slowing down. Our latest demographic report indicates that within the next 5 fiscal years, our K-12 enrollment is going to hit right at 5,000 students. So again, the current year is truly something that we need. It's a great path to be on, growth, definitely. But at the same time, it's also a juggling act as well as a tightrope, trying to make sure that we have the adequate funds to provide a high-quality education to all of our students, while also maintaining fiscally responsible balances. As we know today, many districts in Kansas are declining, but there are protections in place to avoid having them to make immediate budget reductions that could negatively impact their programming. And giving a declining district time to make adjustments is definitely the right thing to do. Yet, growing districts should not be penalized by having to wait a full year for the additional funding. Because of that also, USD 230, we year after year have to set our local mill rate 2 to 3 mills higher than what we would normally have to if the current year funding were available. And then again, in addition, with open enrollment set to begin in fiscal year 25, there is no doubt many districts may see an increase in enrollment because of that, and House Bill 2485 is definitely being proactive in addressing that approach, because that clamor is only going to increase, and 2485 is going to help districts that do see that increase as a result. In general discussions with patrons and colleagues, I do believe that such legislation to fund school districts with the high enrollment that current fiscal year would be welcomed by many and would definitely be equitable for all. Thank you again for the opportunity to address this distinguished committee. Your work is definitely, I know, not an easy task, especially when most everyone that comes before you is wanting money. So I'm happy to answer any questions at the end, and if ever I can be of assistance, you can contact me, and I'll give you all the insight that I can on why current year funding definitely, hopefully, can get to the finish line. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Superintendent. Were there any other oral proponent testimonies? And just to note, we have also Doug Schwinn, Director of Business and Finance from Spring Hill, written only, as well as Joel Bickford, Superintendent of Vermillion Schools, which is a rural school, that is also providing proponent testimony. So committee, I'm going to open it up for questions now for our proponents that were here today. And if someone has written testimony and happens to be here, then you can also direct questions to that individual as well. Committee, what questions? Yes, Representative Estes.
My first question is for Dr. Luttrell. You touched on something that Doug Schwinn put in his written testimony. You guys are trying to attract businesses and growing, and you find that you're in a catch-22, and I want to make sure I'm interpreting what you say correctly. You're in a catch-22, you want to grow, but you can't lower your mills in order to be attractive and get people to move to Kansas, because you got to pay for the students you're not getting the base state aid for.
That is correct, Representative Edgerton. I don't want to speak for our business director, Doug Schwinn, but I'm also thinking what he means is that we are growing very much across our district, but it's mostly all student growth. We have very, very, very little commercial growth yet. Hardly no fast food, no industrial. It's all homes bringing in students. Now, we do think the commercials come. There's been some developments that have been released in the last 12 months that's going to help, but it's going to be 3 or 4 years out before we get that relief. And then but yes, so right now, all of our local property revenue, most all of it, is from the residential local property tax through the residential homes.
Thank you very much. My next question would be for Superintendent Jim Howard. Superintendent, when I read your testimony, I kind of thought, boy, this is hard. We're trying to keep people whole. You mentioned something about what comes with the students. So my question to you, what, if anything, from the old schools followed the students, like chairs, textbooks, desks, and if there were little to none, what did you have to pay out of your district to add those items? Do you know?
So there was some conversations once the building of Wetmore was given to the city. We were able to go in there and some band instruments, all the tables and a lot of the equipment was already removed. Anything that would be considered new student desk. Obviously, we had to buy textbooks, desks, all the things like that. Band equipment and some like used football equipment. They used to have a football program. We did offer money to the city of Wetmore so they could help keep the building because keeping a building is expensive. So there was very little actual usable items. We got the kids. And so that was what we got, and we had to buy everything else. I would be estimating probably 150,000 when it came to student supplies in that first year.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question of research, or should I hold that for later?
Sure, Melissa, would you be, yes, Melissa, go ahead and take that question. And if you could just hang on, she might have another, or do you have any more?
That would be my last one.
Okay, thank you.
So, Melissa, what I'm trying to think of here is, I feel our ultimate responsibility is to the taxpayer. I would like to know what was, those parents paid into things that went to fund the textbook fund, the capital outlay. What can you estimate or figure out the number of children who left Sabetha, what, on a per capita basis, their share of Bay State aid and any other funds that are similar to textbook fund, capital outlay, what those would have been and what that total dollar figure is, and also on a per capita basis? Was that clear as mud?
No, I think I understand where you're going, and you would want to follow all those students, not just those students who were enrolled in the new school district in North Jackson Heights, correct? So
I would want to take all the students who left Sabetha, right, and not just the ones who went to North Jackson.
we'll certainly make an inquiry to see what applicable fees there were for textbooks or for any other equipment for sports participation, if there are other fees, and then as well as anything in terms of capital outlay or equipment.
Okay, so thank you.
Sure, the 80 students, or was it 90? 90 students, the base aid would be easy to calculate because that's kind of your loss, the $600,000. But I think that's an excellent point about fees, because I know every parent that goes through the enrollment process has a lot of fees. You have textbook fees, you have sports fees. Now, those sports fees may be consumed by Keisha, I'm not sure, and not every school requires them. But I think, when my kids were enrolling, it might have been $500 of costs. Representative Estes.
And that's what I'm struggling with here on this bill. On that aspect of it, does it go far enough? Because these families paid in good faith. And do they get to take what they took with them that they put in good faith? And what is the impact to both districts? I don't want to cripple another district, but I don't want families to be left without the benefit of what they put in good faith.
All right, great. I appreciate that, and I think that was York Representative Thomas's committee last year that looked to textbook fees. I think there are runs on that from last year. Maybe we could pull those back out, take a look at those funds for some of those districts and see what that looks like. Very good, committee. Other questions for our conferees today? All right, well, you guys provided excellent testimony. Thank you very much. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I apologize. Representative Garber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to preface this to say I believe we do need some changes, but I want to talk to couple people about what happened in our district. First of all, and I'll do the easy one first. Superintendent DeStormers, how many students did you get from the Wetmore Attendance Center?
Who would you like to have come up, Representative? Okay, perfect.
3.
3? Thank you. Is it Superintendent Hall? No, Hall. Bickford, sorry. How many students did you receive from the Wetmore Attendance Center?
6.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Superintendent Howard, would you come up, please? How many students did you say you received?
90.
Do you get any funds for those students?
So depending on the students, there might be free and reduced lunch waitings, or CTE if they are in some of the pathway classes. So that'll be depending on their status. So there will be some,
Any idea how much money you received for those students?
not off the top of my head. I could give you a rough estimate on the percentage is about 60% free and reduced, and you could take that times the formula of, what, 0.48, something like that. So there was some funding that came in the waitings. No transportation since they were out of district.
Okay.
I would real quick, I would say that it's free lunch only, so double check your.
Free lunch,
To make sure that that 0.6, the 60% that your reference is truly free, not free and reduced, because that may make a difference.
I'm just spitballing, yeah.
I guess what I'm getting at, do they not get the 17 waitings for the most?
There's 11, I think. And waitings are for current year, so it depends. If they have a bilingual student, they'll get that waiting that year. If they at risk, those types of things, yes.
One or two more.
Yeah, sure.
When, did Sabetha, did the USD 113 come to you before they closed the school and offer to give you the school and the building and the property
No,
from Wetmore Attendance Center?
no.
I have a letter here that says it did.
Did they offer to give Jackson Heights the building?
Students and the property of USD Wetmore Attendance Center?
And not in a formal board meeting or any kind of formal setting.
Your name's not on here, but it says that you were given an opportunity. This is a response from Wetmore, and I'll get this to everybody, from Jackson Heights School Board, when Sabetha, USD 113, offered to transfer the Wetmore Attendance Center property area, I don't know how exactly to say that, and it was turned down. And they said, but when you close the school, we will gladly take your students. And were you also aware that USD 113 said we would gladly take every student and we will offer every teacher a job? Did you know that?
I was in that board meeting where the offer was initially made, but that wasn't mentioned in the board meeting.
That was mentioned in the letter.
I guess I would point that of the 124 students, none actually went to Sabetha. So that was more, we're looking at the actual students that came our direction for funding.
I would agree with that. They
So-
didn't go because they were mad, but that's beside the point. But, you know, what I'm trying to get at is closing a school is not easy. I hope none of you ever have to go through it for all involved. And I won't say any more at this point. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure, and thank you, Representative Garber. I do have a question for you, and I understand my home school in Augusta, 10 miles east of Wichita, where I went to elementary school, closed. And so it's now vacant for the most part. It has a community center in it and a little YMCA preschool. So I know, and that was a big deal in my hometown. And again, we are a large, very large 4A. So it doesn't just happen to rural Kansas. It happens in our urban cities as well. I did want to ask you, you mentioned that they offered in the letter, not maybe in a board meeting, but they offered in the letter that they were going to give them the property. Were they going to continue to make the bond and interest payments on it? You said they were going to give them the school. Go ahead,
I don't know that there was any bond and interest payment on it.
Okay.
It was already done, but I'm not positive with that.
The only thing I would note on that would be for a small district to acquire, even in a free property, but to maintain it would be expensive, because you wouldn't be able to consolidate classes. And so that might be that you would have to hire an entire building full of teachers. Might be a little trickier. It sounds really good, but it might be trickier. And I think you're absolutely right. It's a tough issue, and maybe there's some common ground that we can find for that element of the bill. Representative Gardner?
They were offered the building afterwards, too, if they were going to keep it open for attendance. Anyways, that's just one school district, and
Sure.
I am not saying that we don't need to fix this, because we probably do. But to go after a school district just because they followed the law is not good, and it causes dissension. My county's torn apart. People who were once friends from different school districts are now won't even talk to each other. So, yeah, thank you.
Well, Representative, let's see if we can figure it out. Let's see if we can make the situation better and certainly not worse. And that's all we can do. Actually, one more quick question, if there aren't any others, and then we'll move right along. I just saw that Joel Bickford is here, and you had written only testimony. And if you would just come up really quick, I read your testimony, and you're one of the smaller school districts that had quite a substantial hit, about 64,000. But I noticed your comment, and here I was going to read it and let you express any of your attitudes relating to that comment. You said, yet the receiving district must swallow the cost of educating the new student. The losing district continues to get the aid and may spend the funding in any way they choose. I do not believe that that is the intent of the current statute, but it has created this scenario. And so I thought that was a great summary, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to make any comment that you'd like.
Thank you. Thanks for the time to speak today. I think that the intent of it, I don't think, was that one district could close and keep the money for not educating students that they no longer have. And that's the case that we found ourselves in. And granted, 6 students isn't a ton of students, I understand that. But we're a small enough district. If they fall in a class that's over 25 to 27, now I'm hiring an additional staff member because we like to keep that ratio small. And I just think that that wasn't really the intent of how the law was set up, so that one district could basically take that cost on, and the other district, without having those students, would still get the money for those students, even though they weren't currently in their building. So that was I hope that explained it for you, ma'am.
Yes, thank you. And you know what, I'm going to call on the reviser really quick. This was implemented, this new KISA law was 2017, and prior to that, it didn't have 2 years look back, did it? I thought perhaps it had one previous, and can you speak to that?
So the school finance formula that preceded the KISA and the block grants, the SDF QPA, was based on current year enrollment count, and then it did authorize a preceding year option for declining enrollment districts. Then the block grants happened, and then when the KISA was implemented, the legislature chose to use the preceding year enrollment count as the primary count, and then the second preceding year as an option for declining enrollment.
Okay, so there is precedent for switching it back to how it had been previously before the block grants. Okay, just wanted to clarify that we've been under this since 2017, and it's caused some hardship for some districts that are receiving students. Okay, so that closes the proponent testimony, if I didn't miss anyone. And now, Leah, you are welcome to come up. We have 4 minutes for our neutral testimony. Welcome to our committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. As you can see from my testimony, I am appearing today on behalf of the Kansas Association of School Boards as neutral on this bill. And that is because our member adopted legislative policy that was actually affirmed in November, just before the new year, states that we support allowing school districts to use either their current year enrollment or the greater of the past 2 years, the essentially current law, to calculate their state aid. Our members support this position because it helps our growing enrollment districts like Mr. Howard's or Dr. Luttrell's, even though those are two very different situations. And it also helps our stagnant enrollment districts and declining enrollment districts to plan how their schools can best serve their local students. As Madam Chair noted, the statute was changed in 2017. My recollection was at the time that this was put into place to give KSDE and the legislature some certainty, because if you were to only use current year enrollment, the legislature would end up coming back the next year and doing a supplemental appropriation, because you might have a school district that estimated, say, they were going to remain stable, and then they had 50 kindergartners show up, and oh my goodness, and so they have to come back and get a supplemental appropriation. So the law was changed to give the legislature a little bit more certainty in appropriations. And so, but as we have seen over the past few years, we have rapid growth in areas like Spring Hill, and then we also have declining enrollment in other areas, either because of just population loss or other factors. And so last year, Chair Thomas actually had a hearing on House Bill 2040. I believe that was the bill, right? Yeah, 2040, allowing school districts to use current year enrollment. We testified in favor. We stated we certainly support that option as long as districts could also use the current law of the greater of the 2-year look back, because that was current law, and we didn't feel like we wanted to set up people to be winners and losers. And so we did support either current year or the 2-year look back, but as some of you may remember, that bill kind of got mushed into Senate Bill 113 during conference committee, and then eventually the 2-year look back was stricken, and only the current year was what was inserted into the conference committee report. And so that's why I believe we're back this year to try to help fix that. And so I would note that, you know, we have school districts here who are asking to add the current year enrollment, and we have school districts who are here asking you to keep the 2-year look back, and we support both of those positions. And so we ask you to listen to that, and we are happy to support those districts. We do respectfully urge the committee to strike the bill's provision requiring districts that close a school to only use their current year enrollment. That is because making the painful decision to close a school building doesn't necessarily mean that the districts are no longer serving any of the students who were educated in that building. In many cases, a district may be closing a school, but then students are dispersed to other school buildings in that same district. And so you still need most of those staff in order to continue serving those kids. So we would ask you to just strike that position of requiring the districts that close the school to stick with current year. And then we would be pleased to work with the committee to support all Kansas school districts and students. And we believe that that is best achieved through allowing districts to use either their current year enrollment or the greater of the previous 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. Any questions for Leah? Yes, Representative Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Leah, these students that Superintendent Howard has, these 90 students, are they being educated at no cost to the state?
Not that I know of. That's why we support them being able to use current year enrollment.
Who will get the money for those students next year?
Let's see. If you use the current law, it would be the previous district.
Okay. Third question I have for you is, in the scenario you talked about that a district closes an attendance center, and the students are dispersed throughout the district, yes, why would they not be counted in current year enrollment?
Oh, they are. I'm sorry, maybe I'm not tracking your question.
Well, you said it would be a hardship to the district as they disperse those students amongst their other attendance centers, and that they should have look-back funding. But I'm unclear, because it sounds like to me if they disperse to other attendance centers, they would be counted in the current year enrollment.
But if they have the 2-year, they're also able to adjust, because they might have lost some students, because there are some families who, when you close a building, they don't like that decision, and they might choose to vote with their feet and move to a different school district. And so you may see some loss of students, but not all of them. That's what I was trying to say, and I apologize if my testimony was unclear.
Last question, if that's okay with the chair. We don't always get the opportunity to have all of both worlds. Your organization, if you had to choose between previous year and previous year before that versus current year and previous year, which would you choose?
I think we would say that having a 1-year look back is certainly better than none. So, you know, as I noted, our member position is current year or the 2-year look back. But I'm certain that our members would feel that 1 year, a 1-year look back in addition to the current year is certainly better than nothing. And we would hope that we could continue to work with the legislature.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Question.
All right. I think we're good. I do have a question. Thank you, Leah. I do have a question for research. I pulled up the fiscal note for 2040 that was in Representative Thomas's committee initially before it was transferred into our committee here. And it had a fiscal note of $19.9 million. And I recalled that when we removed one of the former years, one of the previous years, because that's a big increase. If you think about it, we have an obligation through Gannon to fully constitutionally fund, and we have done so. And this would have been $19 million on top, in addition to about annually 30 to 50 million more the legislature has funded above Gannon every year for a variety of things, from CTE to dyslexia to math to impact aid and other items that we have funded above the Gannon. This would also be above Gannon. And so we did, I agree with the comment that follow the student. Let the money follow the student where it can do the work that it's supposed to do. If I have a restaurant and I have 100 less customers every month, I need to buy less food and I need to change my labor, and that's my responsibility as being that restaurant manager. And we need our schools to be able to do that. But understanding their challenges, we left the 1 year in, like Leah suggested, is helpful, leaving that 1 year in. My question is for research, is that when it transferred over to us and we recalculated, I believe it was $4 million was the benefit that we were adding to, we were still adding. It went from 19.9 to 4 million. But what we're receiving, the fiscal note this year says it's only a $600,000 benefit. I want to know what's changed on the list that we got from Kansas Department of Education. And I know I caught John before, but I don't think they're the same. And I'm not sure why, and I don't know if one's computed based on maybe the September 20th count dates this year, but they say the same thing. They say 22, 23. So if research could do that and let us know, and maybe work with KSDE and find out what is the difference between, how do we go from 19 million to 4 million and now to 600,000? Note, with the changes, if they were implemented in law, we would be going above Gannon. So, okay. Oh, I apologize. Is it for neutral for Leah? Probably. Okay, Leah, if you'll come on up. Representative Poskin, we have one more question, then we'll go on to our opponent testimony.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not 100% sure who the question is for, but we talk in committees and on the floor a lot about not impugning motive. And on the one hand, I'm hearing how difficult and heartbreaking it is for districts to make a decision to close a school. And on the other hand, I'm hearing that they're incentivized and like, yeah, let's close the school so we get all this extra money. And so I guess what I want to know is, do we have evidence of school districts that are incentivized and they say that in their board meetings and like, we're incentivized to close a school because of the 2-year look back?
Well, there are almost 300 school districts in Kansas, and I don't want to impugn their motives
And that's
either.
why I was going to say that's a difficult.
So I'm not aware of that. Okay. Living in Manhattan, a community that several years ago did have to close 2 schools. Some of you who are military will remember that the Big Red One moved the headquarters to Germany, and the Manhattan School District lost 500 kids, like in a fell swoop. And I happened to be on the other side of the issue then. I was working for the local Manhattan Mercury newspaper, and it was my sad lot in life to be the education reporter. And so I had to cover those hearings about which buildings they were going to close, and those often went until 1 o'clock in the morning. And it was a pretty heart-wrenching decision for the school board and for the community. So that's the only perspective that I have. And again, I don't want to impugn motives either. So
Thank you for that.
I don't know if I helped or not.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And definitely, we wouldn't want to do that. Good question, but I would say that if you look at our formula and you look at where the state spends money, the low enrollment, you either are low enrollment or you are high enrollment. And the low enrollment is over 200 million, and high enrollment is somewhere over 50 million, if I remember right. And it's been a while since I've looked at it. But in that case, if you are a school that's declining, the formula does recognize that. It does compensate. It does allow. So there are some schools, as they decline, especially as they get really small, they start, that percentage they get per student goes up. So we do have a situation where some districts could get 2 to 1 in that low enrollment weighting. So just please keep that in mind, that the low enrollment are compensated in the formula. They're also compensated on the average valuation per pupil, however that may go. So this is just one area, and everything does have a cause and effect. So I do appreciate all the comments. Okay, moving on to our opponent testimony, and we have Rob Reynolds, Superintendent of Douglas Public Schools. Welcome. 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman, and the rest of the committee. I appreciate your time today. In reference to many of the proponents, I want to let them know I do understand some of their challenges. My goal today is to present some information that would give you the other end of the spectrum from a declining enrollment district. Again, over the past 16 years as Superintendent Douglas, we've tried to work with our community and our staff and our boards to balance the challenges that have been brought about by the declining enrollment that we have been seeing. We have a lack of housing. We have issues within the community that I think there's been 1 new house built in the last 3 years. And so we really have a housing issue, and that stems part of our loss of enrollment from year to year. The ability to no longer stabilize enrollment over multiple years would be a detriment to us and other rural districts. We have worked very hard to try to stabilize the staffing and also the resources that we have in our district. But when you look at a loss for a school district with 620 students from time to time, you will see a 20 student decline from year to year. And over time, that adds up pretty quickly. If we only have the ability to use a current year or the 1 year look back, and in the past we've had the 2-year option, we're going to lose about $172,000 projected for next year. We also, that's just the loss in general fund. When you consider those 34 students and the impact, we would lose another $50,000 in LOB, not to mention the possible waiting challenges that we would have. So when you look at a $226,000 loss, and you are looking at that on top of the fact with the recent changes of the requirements with the new open enrollment policy that districts are implementing, we're not going to have any idea of how many students we could lose in addition to our enrollment projections. So, we don't have the time to make adjustments because with the open enrollment law, all of that has to be done and finalized in late summer, right in the middle of our budgeting time. And as a school district, we're not able to make those adjustments. It's too late. We have continuing contract laws in place. We can't make any adjustments on staffing. So we're pushed to the end of the summer before we can make some adjustments to help cushion some of that challenge. The budget process and the requirements that we have in place with revenue neutral, that also backs us up to being able to make some adjustments as well. In our concern as a school district is this is the first year of open enrollment and we don't have the ability to look back. What the unknowns there, how do we prepare for that? So we've got to come up with a process to make sure that we have money in other places to absorb the loss of enrollment. Not having a way to mitigate those enrollment fluctuations will affect the employees in the community. We're very proud of our school district and the things that we have accomplished. But in addition to the housing things, the loss of paras and some of the other employees that we would have to cut due to the loss of enrollment, that would have a detrimental effect to our school district. But again, I understand the complexity of the wide range of challenges we all have, 286 of us, and we're growing on one end, and on the other end, we're declining. And so I understand this committee has to look at ways that that issue can be balanced. One recommendation I would have is to look at a 3-year average, or at least maintain the 2-year look back so that we can have time to prepare instead of not knowing the impacts of the new open enrollment law. There's got to be some time there and some flexibility for some of us that are struggling on the other spectrum. So I'd stand for questions here now or at the end.
Well, you are our only opponent testimony that's here. Yes. Would you like to come up to the microphone, Jim?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm with USA Kansas, and I was working with Susan Thursday afternoon on getting testimony in, and we have a conferee here today, but he's not on the list. Kellum Adams from Leavenworth.
Well, of course he can speak. Is he here? Come on up.
Yes.
You said he was. Come on up. Susan, do we have his testimony? You can come on up. Do we have it? Okay, so what we can do is we've changed things this year. We have a new way to submit testimony, and you can go to our website and find it, but it's k.12.budget, and Jim's got it. If you would resubmit it, and then we can add it, and then you all could have access to it. So please go ahead and state your full name and school again.
Absolutely. So my sincere apologies for not following the proper protocol, Madam Chair.
It's all new, so you're okay.
First name is Kellen, last name is Adams, Superintendent in USD 453 Leavenworth. Just want to say thank you all to your service to Kansas and to Kansas kids. I did file as in opposition, but to be very clear, I do believe there's a middle ground that can benefit all 286 districts, and those are some of the points that I intend to make today. Representative Williams, you made a point earlier, the SDF QPA did have 3 provisions, and I would entertain that we should look at a 3rd provision that would help some of our districts properly right size. And so the 2 ideas that have been brought up today that I think are both worthy of consideration is adding in either that 3-year average that used to be, or adding in the second preceding year. I want to make it very clear, I do think that Spring Hill has needs today. Those students are there today. They need those resources today. But at the same time, if you are one of those districts that is going through year after year declining enrollment, you need to have a stepping off point. And my concern is if we shift to first year only, there will be a skip for several years that will create a significant gap that was not planned. My second concern is the timing. As I understand correctly, this would go live July 1 of 2024. I apologize if I misunderstood the bill. So with that, you've got a needs assessment process that districts are working their way through currently, or they should be, and they are making hiring decisions today. A really important point in time is that last Friday in May, in which all of your teacher contracts are renewed or not. I think that is very important for districts as they begin to plan for general fund expenditures. They need to know what staff is needed. Do I think that there is an option that would entertain both the needs of Spring Hill as well as the concerns of Douglas? I do. Whether that is that second preceding year, 3-year average, I'm not sure, but suffice it to say, I think there needs to be multiple options for our districts while also maintaining the idea that we need to be fiscally responsible to the state. The final thing I have for you is an example that may give you some context, just for, I guess, everybody's sake. The 22-23 median school district was 518 students. So the first half of us are a 1A, 2A, or 3A system. So I want you to imagine if you're one of those systems and you lose 2 kids per class, that would be 26 kids. In theory, that would be 2 first graders, 2 third graders. You get the idea. I'm going to use a very low enrollment weighting for this sake, but suffice it to say the numbers are likely higher in your district. Just those 26 kids would be on average $6,400 in general fund and $165,000. I know in my system, a teacher costs $71,000. If you lose 26 kids, 2 kids per class, you are likely not cutting teachers. You are likely going from a pupil-teacher ratio of 18 to 16, or 20 to 18, you get the idea. And so can systems that small realistically right-size that quickly? And so my goal here is to help our rural schools and our rural environments as they work through right-sizing, while at the same time acknowledging the needs of Spring Hill and those that are growing. Thank you for your time, and again, I apologize for not submitting properly. Thank you, Chair Williams.
No worries. We're figuring it out as we go, so no problem. And we'll get that updated. Thank you, Susan. And I don't think we've missed anyone else. We also have Wichita Public Schools that has written-only testimony. I'm not sure if they're probably not online, but if there are questions, we can certainly send them their way. Also to note, there was a neutral written-only, Dr. Craig Correll, so please take note of that. And are there any questions for any of our opponents? Yes, we have 2 sets of questions. We'll go ahead and start with Representative Poskin and then Representative Estes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure if it's a question because it just formed, but one of the things that we know is that our rural schools are the heart and the center of the communities. And I arrived here in 2021 when the Financial Institutions Committee was Financial Institutions and Rural Development. I'm also on the Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development Committee, and I know that we are doing a lot around rural economic development. We have housing initiatives that should help with the new houses. And I would think that the 2-year look back would be really helpful in trying to let the initiatives that we're doing on the economic development side catch up with our rural schools and not ding our rural schools and have the quality go down and, you know, potentially close when we're trying to build houses in the rural areas and also do economic development in general for the rural communities. Does that sound right? The question would be to the 2 opponents. Does that sound right? That when I'm talking,
Bob can answer.
Yeah, just to give you a little perspective of that topic, our community foundation, which I'm the president of, has created a task force to work with the city to work on initiatives so that we can help the city with looking at building projects and some of the development that they're trying to do with some property that they own. So yes, that's very timely. We've actually sent some of that information to the city so they're aware of it. But hopefully our community foundation can work on that goal. But again, I think you hit it right on the head. We got to have time. And by this being enacted and us dropping off those 34 kids, this summer, we're not having any time to make an adjustment if that passes. So, again, I see the importance of this, but like my friend Kellen said, there's ways that we can accommodate everybody here with the struggles that they have in their districts.
Thank you, Superintendent. I agree, and I do think there is a way to address both issues. Thank you.
Only takes 19.9 million. All right, Representative Estes.
Okay, my question is for the gentleman from Leavenworth, if you'd like to come to the microphone. You talked about fiscal responsibility, and if you look at this from a scenario of somebody from Spring Hill only has people coming in from out of state, that makes them whole. We've only paid for that student once. But if you look at it as a scenario, as a student from an area that's declining in population has moved to Spring Hill, then I'm now paying for that student twice, the empty seat and the new seat. How do I look, people, I always struggle with, we're taking money out of somebody's pocket, and that money could be used for new jobs in their community, however they want to use it, but I'm taking money away from somebody. So how do I pitch that as financially responsible?
I'm not sure I have a full rebuttal to your point. Under the current format, if a student leaves Gardner and goes to Spring Hill, they would, in theory, be counted twice, but it would not be for the entirety of their K-12 career. So to that point, there would be, in theory, a duplicate expenditure, right? At the same time, I will tell you that this is my 5th school system. In almost every system I've been a part of, the USD is one of the top 5 employers. So as your systems reduce their FTE, there is the economic impact to the local payroll and the local taxes as well. So I'm not sure I have a calculation on that.
Sure.
There would be an impact there as well.
And here's what's different. If we're paying current year and we're paying a 2-year look back, that's different, and that changes it economically for me. And I've always been comfortable with the old way, and having them both at the same time, I'm just really struggling to reconcile that. And then when the school district is the largest employer in a district, who becomes left to pay their salary? So there's where I'm struggling with. I don't know, I feel like we're trying to be Solomon here, and it's a difficult thing to do because, thank you for trying to help me.
Thank you.
Representative Johnson.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Representative.
Thank you. My superintendent from Leavenworth, I have a question. When we met earlier to discuss some of the events in Leavenworth County, we talked quite a bit about the interchange between Fort Leavenworth, which is a separate district, but has some very unique needs, and students between there and your district, since there is no high school. Does this bill impact that kind of a relationship at all?
I would say potentially. So for context, those that don't know, USD 453 borders USD 207. USD 207, to my knowledge, is the only district in Kansas that does not have a comprehensive 9 through 12 high school. And so while we do not get all of their 10th through 12th graders, we do get a number of their 10th through 12th graders. Some of their 9th graders stay there at their 7, 8, 9 campus. So to his point, there is a large fluctuation in students. For context, we are about 3,500. Annually, we have 600 students that move in and out of our system. So I have a 3A system that moves in and out of my 5A system. So the mobility of students is certainly a concern to the question that was raised.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, and Representative Hill?
Thank you, Madam Chair. 2 different questions, and I'm sorry, Superintendent Leavenworth, I didn't catch your name, but okay. I have a question for you. You're talking about the students that move in and out. Do you receive impact aid?
Not currently.
Okay. All right, do you have military students?
We do have some that are military connected. The difference for us is that we still have taxable property for the large majority of our district.
Okay. Okay, thank you for answering that. And then the other question is for Superintendent Reynolds. You talked quite a little bit about open enrollment and the challenges of that. You also talked about that you are a district of declining enrollment. I assume historically declining enrollment, is it a year after year thing?
Yes, this is my 27th year in the district as being an administrator, 16th in superintendent. And we will go maybe 1 out of 3 years with a stabilizing or a small increase. When I came to the district in 1997, we had 900 students. Our budget was built on 608 this year.
Okay, I sympathize with the rural districts that are declining because I have many of them in my legislative district. But I was unclear when you talked about the challenge that open enrollment would put on you under this bill. Because the way I see it, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, if you lost students due to open enrollment at the last minute, which you kind of talked about, that you would be able to count them in your count under the previous year. If you gain students under open enrollment, I see that you would be able to count those under current year. I'm not sure that I understand the
I
hardship.
think with the testimony, that was a concern that could affect districts, because if we have a class that drops off, that we no longer count, plus we lose more students, that could actually be a long-term challenge if we don't have the maximum time to average that enrollment, if that makes sense.
Well, I mean,
That was a concern we had.
I mean, maximum time's kind of an ambiguous term. I mean, that could be 5 or 6 years. But I mean, how long does it take for you to adjust personnel and facilities to accommodate students?
We've worked on planning for staffing a year previous. We're actually working on that right now, because when you look at a loss of 34 students, it's not in a package. It's not going to be third grade. It's not going to be second grade. It's going to be spread out through your whole district. And so therefore, that affects funding for support, funding for para support, resources, and everything across the board. So, that's a continual thing that districts work on. And having that impact hit you with with losing the opportunity to go to that 2-year look back, it can be detrimental to us.
So if you lose 34 students this year, you will get to count them next year under this legislation, if I'm understanding it correctly. So you would get the money for those students next year, but they would not be in your building. I'm not understanding how that's a hardship.
Okay, so what I'm talking about is if we get that second year look back that goes away, then, this year we were balanced. I mean, we were flat. So that second year, or that previous year goes away. So we only have the opportunity to go on the current year or and not have the 2 years to look back at those enrollments to stabilize it.
But you would have 1 year.
1 year,
And so it's assuming you lost 34 students each of the 2 years, then what you're saying is you would like to have the resources for 68 students that are not in your building instead of only 34.
I would like the opportunity to have the 2-year
That's what I'm saying.
stabilization.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
All right, well, I'm going to end up with the last and final question. So, Rob, if you'll come up real quick, can you make it a quick question? Because I've got a few. We want to get out of here by 5.
This is for 259, in case they're listening. They submitted written testimony. They talked about egregious damage, but when I look at their pre-COVID numbers, they had 49,900, almost 50,000 students. Today, they are at 46,800 students. They've lost over 3,000 students, or about a little over 6% of their students. This was such a serious thing that we held a hearing on it, and they told us that they were talking to families and trying to get them back. So my question to 259 is, can you please give us the results of that? And also from 2019, your absenteeism was 22.5%, and now last year it was 35.2%. Could you please explain what is going on? Because that will definitely weigh into my consideration. Thank you.
Melinda, would you be able to help and reach out to Wichita and ask them about their absenteeism rate that's jumped 10 points, as well as those missing students that they're getting doubled on? And I will know on this SB 113 run that we received, that was our largest school districts that we're seeing the declining enrollment in terms of the most greatest amount. Okay, now Rob, I'm up, so I'm going to ask you a few questions. So thank you very much. Okay, so I was looking at your profile on KSDE's website, and I saw that you gained students last year. Is that correct? Yes, you gained students, and that how much money would you have received had this not been vetoed?
Well, depending on what you're talking total,
No, KSD, just related to this line item.
just for this line item, not including LOB,
Well, I'm counting everything that the governor vetoed per KSDE's. How much would you have received? It's base aid. That's all we're talking about, base aid amount, and that does impact LOB. Correct, Jennifer? Yes, base aid and weightings do. So how much did your district lose with the governor's veto?
it was approximately 60,000 off the top of my head. I don't have that figure.
Okay,
from That
it was-
run. And that run, are you referring to that run being from the legislative research?
No,
or
it was from,
KSDE?
it was from Kansas Department of Education, and it was 65,741. I also wanted to ask a question. Is open enrollment, or has open enrollment always been the case for smaller schools? Has there ever been a time that Douglas has not permitted Augusta or a Rose Hill student to enter in? Or has there ever been a time that Augusta hasn't accepted students? Because the way that I understand it, as being a lifelong Butler resident, is that smaller schools have always had open enrollment. Is that correct or not correct?
We would allow open enrollment up until the first week of school.
So after
Under conditions.
So after September 20th, you wouldn't take a child that wanted to come in? Or
Not out of district, we wouldn't.
okay, that's interesting. I know Augusta has typically taken, and many districts do, because that's a benefit long-term to grow your community. Do you know what your enrollment count was on September 20th?
Yeah, we turned in 607.5, I believe.
Okay. And then my last question is, do you know how much Douglas received for low enrollment weighting last year? And if you don't, that's
I
okay.
can't accurately say that without looking.
Okay.
But breaking that out, no, I don't.
Okay. Well, the reason I wanted to bring that up is because I mentioned that earlier, that the state gives about 200 million for low, and high they give about 50. I'm going to give an example because I'm going to just use you as an example in my community. Douglas receives $1.18 million in low enrollment weighting for 596 students. 10 miles away, Augusta receives high enrollment weighting. They have 1,934 students, and they receive 353,000. Why do I bring that up? The reason I bring that up is the formula is not blind to schools that are declining enrollment. The formula is not blind to low enrollment. The formula is not blind to rural schools. We protect rural schools. And so Douglas is already benefiting from low enrollment, whereas Augusta and some of those other schools do not get that at all. And what they are receiving are real students in real time that they can't pay for. And the only answer I'm hearing from some today is that we just give everything, that we just give the $19 million and make everybody happy. Well, we could do a 4-year look back. We could do 5. But the answer is that we need to decide, our districts and legislature needs to decide, do we want 1 and 1 or do we want 1 and 1? That's what we have before us, and what is best for our kids, follow the student or not follow the student. And if you receive those students, wouldn't you want to be paid for those students?
Well, yeah, I understand their concern, yes, I get that. But what I'm concerned about is having that flexibility of the 2-year look back.
Well, I think Douglas is a fantastic school, a fantastic little community, and I think that they'll do a great job of attracting. So maybe I'm more optimistic.
Well, there's other variables, Christie, or Representative Williams, I'm sorry. There's other variables which we've talked to you before about, and some of those variables, there's housing, there's employment, not having a grocery store in town. Until recently, we have a Family Dollar. But when you lose businesses, and you know, we're a bedroom community with nowhere for people to live, and an aging community, it's a challenge in small districts. So
Life is a
we do
challenge.
too, and we work hard at promoting our district. We work hard at trying to create opportunities for kids, and we're going to continue to do that. But again, what I'm saying is having that flexibility to equalize that enrollment will help not only us who's experiencing declining enrollment, but also other districts.
One last question, and then we will actually close up. And since it's 4:55, I feel like we're doing pretty good. Representative Thomas.
Just a quick comment more than anything else. I think it's worth noting that the time for this bill is actually perfect this year, and I say that because, friendly reminder, next year, the COVID money runs out. We stop spending it, we stop dishing it out. And I know Douglas, for example, you guys got about $893,000, which is pretty much at the top tier as far as per student what ESSER paid out, whereas districts like Spring Hill, it was more like the low end of $300 per student. So, but all that money runs out next year. So I think it's worth pointing out that a lot of these districts, like Douglas, also got a very high end per pupil on the ESSER funds, and that money runs out next year. So if we're gonna do this current year funding, we're about to see a big financial change next year as well. So I think the timing of this is just as important, but I did want to point out the ESSER funds piece as well.
Well, thank you. And Representative Thomas is our ESSER fund expert. So if you could bring that with you every time, that would be awesome. Committee, just so you know, when we have a hearing and eventually we will likely work the bills that we have hearings on, and that likely many of them will be put together with our funding. Usually policy and funding goes hand in hand here at the Capitol. But I wanted to know that you may like some parts of bill, not other parts of a bill, but that's your job as members of this committee to offer amendments. So if there are no other items, I will close the hearing and on 2489, and we are adjourned.